So we think we have to believe every thought that comes into our brain, but we don't. And when you realize that, it gives you the freedom to actually argue it back and say, no, that's not true. No, it's not the end of the world. And to be able to reframe stuff.
Welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and we are going to have another conversation today to help small, medium business owners get more out of their business. And look, I think the best place to start with looking after your business is looking after yourself. So it's the old adage of putting your own oxygen mask on first, if you've ever been flying and watched the safety warnings. And why is that so important? Well, business owners, you are the key to your business. Yes, we want to take you out of the picture so that you have a business that works without you. But for all businesses, they start and still rely heavily on the business owner. Now, the health and well-being of the business owner is quite important. Have a healthy business. So we're going to have a look at today at the topic of stress and the business owner. And the first question we want to really answer is stress actually a bad thing? And look, I'm not an expert on this topic. So that's why we've grabbed Fiona Kane. If you're thinking that name is familiar, well, you may have heard her speaking before, because Fiona is the founder of Informed Health. She's experienced an award-winning nutritional medicine practitioner, a holistic counsellor, and mind-body eating coach. She does one-on-one nutrition and coaching consultations with individuals via telehealth and in person, and runs online group health programs. She's also a speaker on health and nutrition, and she does a lot of work with Well-Placed Wellbeing and supporting gym health challenges, and is a regular appearance on radio, seeing Fiona's name pop up in so many places. She's been interviewed on 2GB, Ticker TV, 6PR, ABC Radio, Triple M. We could list a few more, I think, Fiona. So, Fiona, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. And look, maybe this topic is quite overdue. We've gone through the past couple of years of some pretty horrendous times for business owners. And there's I guess I'm going to say it's a misconception that the stress and problems related to COVID for business owners are done and dusted. I think we're still very much there, and we've got a lot of hangover and still a lot of work to do as business owners. And I'm actually seeing stress levels for business owners on the rise at the moment. Now, I asked the question, is stress a bad thing? So maybe we should start with actually, what do we mean when we talk about stress, and is it actually a bad thing?
Yeah, so stress is defined as really any type of change that causes physical, emotional, or psychological strain. So it requires your body's response, and so your body has to respond to that stress. And whether it's a bad thing or not, well, it can be a good thing and a bad thing. So, of course, I think we do need to have some level of stress, because simply that's what motivates us. If we didn't have the stress of the due date of the thing, or, making the business successful or whatever it is, we wouldn't keep going. We wouldn't keep moving. So stress to a certain degree is great, because it actually encourages performance, it encourages us to stay on track and to work towards a goal. So stress from that perspective is a good thing. But when we have chronic, unrelenting stress, which is kind of what the last few years have been, that can really take its toll on us, physically and emotionally. So, stress can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. It kind of depends on how it's affecting you. There's lots of factors that will relate to how it's affecting you as well. So, yeah, it's not always bad, but it's identifying whether or not it's a problem for you.
Mm-hmm. So I think I'm seeing different ways that people have handled the situations over the past couple of years. And what's been a negatively stressful situation for some people has actually been a positive situation for others. Some have seen it as a positive opportunity, change things for the better, and have come out on the other side with a stronger business, a stronger outlook. And others are just weighed down by the constant pressures of the deadlines and expectations, the conditions that they've been facing.
Yeah, and that can really depend on your health going into all of this. What was your health like? What were your stress levels like to start with? So what was your starting point? And then also, of course, different businesses have had different kinds of stresses. So some have had stresses that you could pivot and you could change this and do that. And other businesses have been more weighed down by challenges that are a bit harder to recover from. And then you add to it the way that you respond to stress and the way that you approach stress. And some people, when they're feeling stressed, they are able to reframe it. They are more able to do that pivoting and to do that sort of self-talk that allows them to kind of say, oh, I can do this, as opposed to other people may struggle with that.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the way we approach stress and these, factors that create stress will be different for different people. So obviously how we approach it, you mentioned some people are a lot more positive in their response to stress and others weighed down. How we think about stress, that obviously affects how it impacts us. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So there's a few things along those lines. So the first thing would be, you've heard the sort of people that speak really negatively a lot of the time. And when things happen, they're going, oh my God, it's the end of the world, it's over, it's terrible. And so, of course, we already know that when we're using a lot of that closed end of the world, really shut down language, that's really not helpful. That just closes us down and closes our ability to even see opportunities or to see our way out. So partly it's the way that we talk about what's going on in our life, but also even just really, really specifically how we think about stress. And there was actually a study done on this, and it was a study tracking 30,000 adults in the United States over 8 years. And they started by asking people how much stress they'd experienced in the last year. They also asked them, do they believe that stress is harmful to your health? And then they used the public records to find out who died and who was still alive at the end of that time. And what they found is that people who experienced a lot of stress in the previous year had a 43% increased risk of dying, right? Which is pretty full on. So that stress increased their risk of dying. But it was only true for the people who believed that stress was harmful to their health. So people who experienced lots of stress but did not view stress as harmful were no more likely to die. In fact, they were the least likely to die in this study. They were even less likely to die than the people who had little stress. So it was actually the people who believed that stress was bad for them when they were experiencing stress who were more likely to die from the stress. So yes, the way that you think about stress, what you think about it, if you're experiencing stress, and I've heard this a lot with people saying, oh, this is going to kill me, this is going to be the end of me, this is making me really sick, all of this language around stress, simply put, what did Henry Ford say? Well, if you think you can, you think you can't, you're right. Well, in this case, if you think stress is killing you, you're right. If you think stress is not, you're probably right with that too.
Mm-hmm. So how we think about stress has an impact on how it affects us. Is there anything that we can actually do about it? Because a lot of people say, well, hang on, that's just the way I am. I have no control over that. But I think there's actually some ways that we can change our approach to stress. And I think you've got some good ideas on how we might start with doing that.
Yes. So for starters, it's not just how you are. I mean, it is, but it's not. I mean, everything's just a program. Yeah. And you can change programs. You just have to be aware that you are doing it in the first place. And you can't just change it overnight. However, you can just start to be aware and start to notice your language and start to notice what you're saying. And the more you notice it, the more you can sort of interrupt it. And it's just hearing yourself have that thought. And it's that ability to kind of hear the thought. See, we think we have to believe every thought that comes into our brain, but we don't. And when you realize that, it gives you the freedom to actually argue it back and say, no, that's not true. No, it's not the end of the world. And to be able to reframe stuff. So it's a really good idea to learn how to reframe stuff and learn how to sort of interrupt that thought and go, just because my mind is saying it doesn't make it true, and literally reframe it to, no, it's not the end of the world. It's really challenging, yes, but what can I do now? And sometimes it is breaking it down to, especially with this business stuff, some days I just have to break it down to, what can I do today? What does today look like? And I will do that. And then I'll worry about tomorrow. And sometimes you really have to do that. But the other thing too with stress is we do know, so when you have a stress response, what happens is sort of all your blood rushes to your heart so it can beat faster and you get all the oxygen. And what can happen is you can maybe start to have palpitations or just shallow breathing, that kind of thing. And that can be a good thing, right? That can actually help you. It is your body preparing you to deal with the situation. But what happens is many of us perceive it as a bad thing. Oh, I'm going to have a panic attack. Oh, I'm feeling stressed. This is bad. This is terrible. And again, it was another study they did at Harvard University where they actually taught the participants to view the physiological changes as if their body was getting energized and preparing them for the challenge. And when they did that, when they were able to reframe what that stress response was, it made all of the difference. So what they found is when they reframed it and they just said, the pounding heart's preparing you for action. If you're breathing faster, it's great because you're getting more oxygen to your brain. Well, those participants were less stressed and less anxious and more confident. And the other interesting thing that happened is physiologically what happened is it actually was better for their health, because what we found is that when people go into that stress response, they can have this narrowing of their blood vessels. But if they believed that the stress response was helping them manage the situation, their blood vessels stayed relaxed. So just the belief that that stress response is a good thing that's there to help you through a challenging experience is enough for the difference between it doing damage to your heart, doing damage or not. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we don't often think about that. I think a lot of us tend to think that, our way of responding is that we've actually got to do stuff or respond, but that's taking that step back and how we approach what's going on with our bodies and how our body's responding.
Yes.
Makes a big difference. And I think, that approach that you are in control of how you manage your stress is a big
Yes.
thing. Like, the things within what we can control, we feel better about it. If we don't feel we can control it, and I think that's how a lot of people approach stress, is that it's something beyond their control. If we don't think we can control it, then I think my observation of a lot of people, and particularly in the past couple of years, advising people on their businesses and the business stress, is that when it's something beyond their control, they don't handle the stress really well. But when they think that there are things in there that they can control, they tend to respond a lot more positively to what's going on.
Yeah, I see that with my clients all the time. And the truth is there's a lot in life that we can't control. So it's actually it's empowering yourself. So if you understand the stress response, you understand what's happening, and you can empower yourself to use it to your advantage, to understand what it is, that it's there to help you. And also understand sometimes if you're going into a stress response and you maybe don't need to be, like me with cockroaches. And in that case, I sort of said, you really don't need to have a big stress response to deal with a cockroach. And I just remind myself that I'm safe and I'm fine, and I actually don't need the stress response right now because I'm good.
Yeah.
Because it's not healthy to be in the stress response 24/7. So we use it appropriately. But if we're in it all of the time, therein lies the problem. So it's when you go in it appropriately to sort of really use that. And it's when you start going into it sort of inappropriately to start to recognize that and talk yourself down from the ledge and just remind yourself that you're safe and well and the cockroach isn't going to kill you.
So what sort of things can we do, though? Like what you mentioned, that focusing on being more relaxed and the breathing. What other things should we be doing to sort of help manage that situation, that stressful situation, or that, I guess, that negative stress situation?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So yes, definitely breathing. And I actually get my clients to do the 4 seconds in and 7 seconds out. I get them to do that for 1 minute. So you breathe in for 4 seconds, breathe out for 7 seconds. You do that for 1 minute. And that switches your body out of that stress response and back into that rest and digest, which is where we need to be most of the time. So it kind of just calms your body into that calm rest and digest mode, which is where your body does all its regeneration and all of that kind of thing. So we need to be there most of the time. So the other thing, though, is that what we need to do is we need to connect with people. We need connection. So we need to talk to somebody. Now, women do this quite well. It's actually called the tend and befriend response. And men are getting better at it too. But it's essentially we do need to connect with others. And so in business, that might mean business networking, or it might mean, a core group that are your group that you talk to. It could be just talking to your friend. It could be going, on a walk and talk somewhere or whatever it is. But it's being able to connect with somebody else. It's really important. And when we go into this tend and befriend response, we release a hormone called oxytocin, and that is the one that actually reduces that risk of the cardiovascular disease. And the even extra thing that will really benefit you, either hug someone, obviously someone who wants to be hugged, or do something kind for someone. So when we do something kind for somebody else, it actually releases that oxytocin for us. And that's that cardioprotective nutrient that helps us. So literally, instead of being so focused on, oh my God, it's the end of the world, what am I going to do? Just do something outside of yourself. Just do something kind for somebody else. One, it just reframes things for you and kind of gives you a bit of perspective and gets you away from whatever you're stressed about. But secondly, you release oxytocin, and that can make all the difference in your stress response and whether it can be damaging to your health or not.
Yeah, and I think looking after other people deflects that focus from what's happening to you at that time.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why it's just so important to reframe things. Sometimes we have to step away. And so whether it be with your family or whether it be volunteering somewhere or something you do with your staff or whatever that looks like, helping out a friend, but that can really kind of just help that focus. It can really just help us, I don't know. And it's just the other thing besides the connection, like connecting with others, is just getting out, like going out to the sunshine, getting some vitamin D, also gives you perspective. I don't know about you, but if I'm sort of sitting trying to figure something out and my brain I can't do it, I go outside and go for a walk, even just as a walk around the block. I come back and my brain's working again and it's flowing,
Yeah, I was in the habit of taking I used to call them my sanity breaks, where I'd go out at lunchtime and go for a walk and come back. And I just generally found I was a lot more productive in the afternoon, having had that 20, 30 minutes of exercise and just some sunlight. So
yeah, it's good for your physical health and it's good for your mental health as well. It's good for both. The other thing too is that with stress hormones, when we are flooding our body with stress hormones, especially if we're doing it quite a lot because we're going through something really stressful, moving your body actually helps you move them out, move them through. So when we sort of sit and stew in them, they're more likely to cause us an issue. Whereas if we're kind of just really stressed sitting at our desk, maybe we need to get up and we just need to move them through. So I'll have a dance break. I'll stop, put on a fun song and just dance around for 5 minutes, even if that's all I can do. I will do that. And it kind of just loosens everything up and just lets go of some stress,
And look, I guess we can't have a conversation about stress without talking about eating, because I think stress triggers probably some harmful eating habits for some people, or maybe even, let's go beyond eating, what's happened in the past couple of years, alcohol consumption.
Yeah, that's been a big thing the last couple of years. But certainly, yes, what we consume, whether it be what we drink or what we eat or what we take, all of those things will affect our health. And if you're already eating poorly, if you're already eating a high junk food diet, that kind of thing, or if you're already drinking too much, then stress will hit you even harder. And even if you're eating well, eventually it will start to fall apart if you stop eating well. And generally that's what we do. We start having stress and we're not sort of sleeping as well. And because we're not sleeping as well, we start going for the caffeine and the sugar and we hype ourselves up all day and then we can't calm down and sleep at night. So you might have a couple of drinks and, you're going to go through the drive-through because you're stressed and busy and before you know it, things are a whole lot worse because all of that just adds to that ability for your brain not to be able to turn off, but not be on in a useful way, just kind of that wired and tired thing. And you're just depleting nutrients from your system and all you're doing is just making the problem worse. You're adding a physical stress and that physical stress is going to add to your emotional stress. So we tend to sort of compound the problem because we already feel stressed. And so we do kind of the easy, quick thing. And if you did that for a day or so, it would probably be okay. But sometimes we can go into doing it long term. The other one is, stress eating, which is a big one for me that I have to be aware of. I'll go for food when I'm really stressed. And if I do that occasionally, it's not an issue. But if I'm doing that over and over, that's really sabotaging my health.
So there's some triggers there, I guess, that we should be aware of. And maybe, look, I used to structure in that movement time, that making sure that healthy food was available. So I think you can prepare for those situations and making sure that you've got a supply of good healthy food, good snacks, that you don't put yourself in that position. So there's a bit of planning that can help.
Yeah, the better you set yourself up, the easier it will be. And that's the thing about stress too, is, or life really, is that if you prepare yourself when you're not so stressed and when it's not so hard, if you're looking after yourself, if you already have got really good habits, and if you already have access to good food, whether it be from a healthy takeaway or making your own or stuff you put in the freezer, if you're already practicing all those things, it's so much easier when life happens, because you're well to start with, and if you've got connections as well already, if you've got all those things in place, then you can actually put them in place. It's part of the plan, really, isn't it? So it's a bit like planning when you do the fire emergency drill for the building. It's the same sort of thing. If you plan, well, what's the drill if I'm going to go through a stressful period? And you are, because you're human, you're going to go through a stressful period. So the more we do plan for that, the more we understand it is going to happen. It's just a matter of time. The more we are in the habit of knowing to reach for these connections, these friends, this food, this movement, the more that we are already trained to do that, the easier it will be for us to reach for those things when we are going through a stressful period. Whereas if your life's coming undone and you're really overwhelmed, and then suddenly someone says, so start breathing and go and do exercise, it'd be really overwhelming and feel really hard to do. So the more you prepare, the better it is. But I would still say to anyone, if you're in it, if you're in amongst it right now, the question I ask myself is, what does self-care look like for me today? And depending on your situation, you might not be able to go to the gym. There's a whole bunch of things you might not be able to do, but there's something you can do. You can probably just breathe. Might be able to get some protein to eat, because protein's really grounding, and protein's really important to help us with stress. So it keeps your blood sugar levels balanced, and it's got all the nutrients to help with your brain neurotransmitters. So making sure you have that sort of piece of chicken or fish or whatever it is, just have that, eating a regular protein, drink lots of water, and remember to breathe. Maybe that's all you can do, or maybe the breathing part's all you can do, but it's better than not doing anything at all. So it's kind of just do something rather than nothing.
So planning is important. We always say that you should plan, particularly for your business and your risks,
Yes.
but really looking after yourself, because you are critical to your business. And I think the statistics on how many small businesses don't actually have any employees, it's wholly dependent on the business owner. That makes it even more important that we do look after ourselves.
Yes.
And we do make plans for how we're going to manage our stress. So, Fiona, there's some really good tips that you've shared with us. It's great stuff there. And I think you've got some links to some resources that would be good for our listeners to have a look at.
Yes.
So we're going to put those in the show notes. What particular resource would you like to point our listeners to help with the topic of managing stress?
Yeah, so I've got two useful ones. I've got the Food and Mood ebook, so that you can download that from my website, and that's really good advice on the foods that will really help you manage stress and keep a healthy, balanced mood. I've also got our strategies for managing emotional eating ebook as well, and a lot of us are having those issues at the moment, and that one would kind of go for other things, other habits besides emotional eating, because it's essentially how to deal with unwanted habits, really. So even if it's not eating that is your issue, you'll probably find something useful in there.
That sounds great. And I know you run some regular workshops and seminars, so I'd encourage our listeners to have a look at those and maybe sign up for some of those workshops, or at least subscribe so that you're going to find out when those workshops and seminars are happening.
Yes. Yeah, we have a regular newsletter, and we share all of that in the newsletter. I share lots of great tips and information in our newsletter and all of our socials as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Fiona, thank you for your time today. It's been quite enlightening to hear from somebody who does have experience in this field, because it is something that's critical to every business owner.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I've really enjoyed talking about this. This is just one of the biggest topics I work with individuals and businesses. It's a real big issue. So we really need to look at these strategies. We can't change the fact that stress happens, but we can change the way we respond to it.
Fantastic. Thanks again for your time, Fiona.
Thank you.